Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Chronically Courageous. It has been a long time, which I will explain. But first, I want to go ahead and introduce my very special guest today for the relaunch of my podcast. And that is my beautiful and talented and extremely brilliant niece, Samantha Brechner. Am I pumping you up too much, honey?
All good. I love it.
You love it. Yeah.
I'll take
So,
that I can get.
Sam is not only my niece, but she is also another zebra. And if you're not familiar with the term zebra, that was a term that was formed to describe people with rare diseases. And it's because in medical school, they teach the doctors to always look for a horse, kind of look for the most obvious answer and not to look for the things that are less common. And with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, although we're finding it's not as rare as we once thought it was, it's rarer than a lot of other things. And it's something that most people don't know about. And it's rarely diagnosed because the medical community isn't as well versed in it as people like Sam and I would like it to be. So that's one of the reasons I'm doing this, because I want to raise awareness. I want more people to know. I want more people to be able to get diagnosed earlier and not go through the trauma and pain of not knowing what's wrong with them. So give Sam a little intro to get started. So Sam congratulations to you, Sam. She just recently graduated with her MBA and has a promising
Thank you.
career ahead. And she, like I said, is very brilliant, but also just such a bright, beautiful soul. And I can't be around her and not feel happy and warm and good. And she's just a sweetheart. And I'm very, very blessed to have her as my niece. I love you, Sam.
I love you, and I'm blessed to have you as my aunt.
So Sam and I not only have our DNA in common, but we have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome in common. And that is because of our DNA, because there is a 50% chance that if one parent is carrying Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, that their children will have it, which means that I have to assume that your mother probably has it, because although she doesn't present like we do with such severe symptoms. So, yeah, and that's the thing, is it can be so different for everybody. And I wanted to have Sam on today to talk a little bit about her journey with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, because it is Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome Awareness Month, which is why I am wearing this shirt today. And it really speaks a lot to how I feel. Don't judge a disability by its visibility. And there's so much truth to that. And I think that Sam and I will get a little deeper into that part of the conversation today as we talk about, kind of what we'd like people to know about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So let's kind of kick it off, Sam, by talking about how Ehlers-Danlos syndrome has changed each of our lives. Do you want to get started?
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, so having EDS originally felt like an extreme life change when I was diagnosed a few years ago. And now, as I have learned to cope with it, it has become a part of me almost. Do I still have some scary spells? Yes. But do I let it affect my mindset and stop me from achieving my goals? No. And if anything, having EDS has made me appreciate all that life has to offer and appreciate all that my body does for me.
Yes, absolutely. I hear you. Yeah, I mean, EDS has affected me in so many ways, and of course, I'm more than twice as old as you, so I've had a lot more time with it, and time to experience the ups and downs of it. But I think one of the most profound things is it caused me to not have a career anymore. I had to involuntarily retire at the age of, I think it was 45, as a result of all of my symptoms and going into the office and being so sick that I just really wasn't able to function, really bad brain fog. And, I would sit behind my computer shivering, because one of the things we get is body temperature dysregulation. And everyone else would be walking around in tank tops, and I'd be wearing a sweater and sitting in front of a space heater and still shaking and doubling over in pain from my stomach and getting a headache and blurry vision. I could barely see my computer screen, and then the brain fog. The brain fog is so intense. It's the most frustrating thing when you're trying to think of something and you're trying to. We're not stupid people.
No.
We're pretty smart, I have to say. But when your brain isn't working, it's so frustrating. And I would walk around the office with a yellow pad. And as I was speaking to people, I would take notes because I literally couldn't remember what was said from the time I walked across the office and then back to my office to, write it down and remember what I had just discussed and what I was supposed to do next. So it was, you kind of get these adaptive techniques as you learn how to deal with it. But it was also so severe that I'd be talking to somebody and all of a sudden I'd crouch down on the floor and they'd be like, what are you doing? And
Right.
I was like, I'm just trying not to pass out. Isn't that normal?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't everybody do that in the office? And that's when things started to get a little sketchy. And they were like, okay, I think maybe, after a couple of trips to the ER and calling in sick and having to be driven home in the middle of the day because of, just horrible, horrible symptoms and feeling like I was going to faint. I was called into the office of the chief financial officer and said, you're just too ill to work and we're going to have to part ways. And that was a really profound moment of my life. And it was really hard because it was something, my career was so, so important to me. So that's one of many, many ways that EDS has changed my life. I mean, it's changed my life in good ways too. I've met some amazing people and formed some incredible bonds.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, some of my best friends are other people with other chronic illnesses or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And there's just an understanding that runs so deep that you don't, do you know what I mean, Sam? It's like,
I completely know what you mean. It's one of those things where everyone on the outside can understand, but they don't feel it until if you've experienced it. You know what
exactly.
I mean?
Yeah, you have to live it to truly understand what it feels like. And
Right.
I mean, the conversations that I can have with my friends with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome there's no such thing as TMI. There's
Right.
nothing off limits, right?
You finally feel a part of the community.
Yeah.
And I love being in this Zebras group chat on Instagram,
Yes.
and everybody can share their symptoms, help, give advice if anyone has gone through a similar situation. So it really feels like a community.
100%, 100%. And it's funny just to give an example of like some of the, kind of weird things that we do. I mean, well, for one, poop is not an off limits topic. I mean,
Oh yeah.
we
Oh yeah,
talk about
girlfriend.
bodily functions because our bodily functions don't always work the way they're supposed to. So, I mean, things that are not normal conversations to have with other people are very normal for us and very natural. And it is what it is. But
Yes.
I went to lunch the other day with a good friend of mine who is actually the person that kind of helped lead me to my Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis. And she had just had a surgery, and I had a surgery a few months ago. And after we finished eating, we went into the bathroom and showed each other's scars. And she said, like, other people would be grossed out by this or wouldn't be interested. And for us, it's just like, just another day in the life,
Another day.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a nice bond. I mean, I think
It's
sometimes
comforting.
it is. And I think like the tough things sometimes are the things that bond us more than, just the like going to a party or something, I mean,
Right.
look at even some of the times in American history. I mean, 9/11 is an example when that happened and New York just kind of came together and even the United States came together. I mean, it's horrible that these really tough things, these really tragic things have to happen, but many times that's what brings people together. And I think, we have this strong bond because of all the hardships we've been through with our condition. So
Right.
yeah, so that's the
Totally.
bright side of it.
Yeah, that's true. On the other side.
On the other side, yeah. So Like another thing that makes it so hard, like we talked about before, it's kind of rarely diagnosed and it's not as well known in the medical community. So I believe, I don't know if this is still true, but I believe a few years ago, the statistic was that it takes an average of 7 years from the time that someone tries to start looking for a diagnosis to actually getting the Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis. And there's some that are fortunate enough to have a shorter time, and others like me that waited over 40 years to try to figure out what the heck was going on with my malfunctioning body.
Right.
And, and that can be really hard because um, you go to doctors and they look at your blood work and everything's normal, and they look at what you look like on the outside and everything appears normal and healthy, and they dismiss you. And that's really, really hard and really painful. Sam, do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like for you to get to your point of diagnosis and kind of that journey you had to go on?
Yeah, I would love to. So, my journey to diagnosis was a long and scary roller coaster. I was at a point in my life where I had no clue what was going on with me, why I always had pounding in my ears, why I always felt lightheaded, or why I felt like I couldn't eat without feeling crappy or having the most brutal stomach ache. And this is until I found out what was going on with me. And that's when all of the answers became flowing my way. And once I figured out what was going on with me, I was able to begin my healing journey. And now, years later, I actually have never felt better. So, and I owe a lot of it to you
Aw.
for, helping me through that process, recommending the doctors, being there with my once a week, terrified from the pounding in my ears call, and not knowing what was happening. So thank you for that.
Of course, and that's not the reason I didn't invite you on to like pump me up, but honestly, that truly is one of the reasons I do, try to do advocacy and why I'm doing this podcast again, because just through, things I've done on social media and through my podcast, I've helped several people to figure out what's going on with them and to point them in the direction of certain solutions and doctors. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just saying that's what gives my pain a purpose. It makes me feel like I've been through all this stuff, and what's it all for if I'm not going to use it to help other people? I mean, it just
Right.
makes it mean something. It makes it worthwhile somehow. Not to say that I love having Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Mhm.
I mean, I'd have a very different life if I didn't. But
Oh, yeah.
I've got it, I don't have a choice, so I may as well, make something of it and give back to people and help other people through it, because it's I mean, the pain of being gaslit by doctors. And, if anyone's not familiar, it's a very popular term these days and it's often misused. But the actual definition of gaslighting is making somebody question their own reality. So, like, for instance, I went to the hospital and I had severe, severe pain in my neck going down my shoulder, like a horrible nerve pain. And I got sent home with some codeine and saying it was just a strain. So the reality was that the next day I wound up in the hospital and my arm was completely paralyzed and I needed emergency spinal surgery. But I got gaslit into believing that it was just a strain. So, and these are things I could tell an infinite amount of stories, of how this has happened in so many different aspects of my life. And I'm sure, Sam, that you also have had situations like that. It's a
I've
very,
had
very
my fair share.
common thing. It's a very common thing. And that's why, if we can help people get diagnosed sooner, they have to go through less of that, because if people actually put a name to what's happening in their bodies, they can then, explain to other people and communicate it and be taken more seriously and not,
Right.
not questioned.
And it also comes with partial acceptance too. Finding out what is going on with you and having an actual diagnosis allows you to begin healing, because without knowing what's going on, you don't know what to do besides stress out and try and figure out what's going on, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's scary. And, while there's no cure per se for Ehlers-Danlos, there are certain treatments and certain techniques and things that we learn over time. And again, the community is a huge part of that. We're always sharing kind of tricks of the trade. And
Mhm.
that really can be helpful. I mean, since we're talking about it, let's talk about that. I mean, have you anything that you can think of that has been particularly helpful to you, Sam, and what you've learned?
Yeah, some things that are helpful. Well, first of all, what you eat. um, yes, what you put in your body is very important because that affects how you're going to feel. And a few years ago, when I found out that I had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I decided to go vegetarian and eventually vegan. And that's when I just had my long journey of being vegan for the past 2.5, 3 years. And it wasn't until recently, this previous March, where I just started going back to vegetarian. And this is because I am doing a very long trip to Europe and I would like to enjoy the food.
Yes, I don't blame
Um,
you. They have good cheese and things there.
yes, I want a croissant when I wake up. I want the pastas. Um, so I will go back to being vegan when I get back, but it has been a huge process implementing dairy back into my diet. Another thing is regular exercise. A symptom that is hard for me to deal with is the lightheadedness. And I find that the looseness in my joints really affects me. And if I don't continuously go to the gym and strengthen my joints, they always hurt. And that is just no fun, feeling like your joints are all falling out of place. I mean, you really don't appreciate your body working until it doesn't work, you
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. No, that's so true. That's so true. We have to work extra hard to hold everything together. Most people have, and that's a characteristic of Ehlers-Danlos. If anybody's listening that doesn't really know, but one of the there's many characteristics, but one of them is having what's called subluxations and dislocations. And a subluxation is like a partial dislocation. And we can sneeze and a rib goes out of place. I mean, it's kind of like a running joke in the community. Most people have to fall over on their head to hurt themselves, and all we have to do is sneeze, and we've got a rib out of place. So,
The amount of times I have a weird pain somewhere and I have no idea what's going on, and I just have to give it 4 days and see if it goes back to normal, but I'm terrified the entire time.
yeah, yeah, because you never know. I mean, is this something that's going to need surgery, or is this just like some weird fleeting thing, or you
Right.
just don't know what it is. So,
hmm
any other tips that you've found helpful to help?
What I do to prevent the lightheadedness and dizziness, feeling like I'm going to pass out every single time I stand up. This has just become a habit for me now because I've been doing it for what feels like forever. But every time I stand up, I squeeze every single muscle in my body and shoot all that blood to my brain. Believe it or not, it helps.
Oh,
um,
absolutely. Absolutely. No,
yeah,
it does. I mean, that's a big part of it too. And that's kind of, it's not directly Ehlers-Danlos, but most people that have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome also have something called dysautonomia, which is a dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system, which controls all the things that we just automatically expect our bodies to do, like breathing and heart rate and blood pressure and digestion and many more things. But circulation is poor as a result of that, and blood pressure can drop and heart rate can drop or go really high, causing that lightheadedness. So if you can do whatever you can do, like crossing your legs really tight, squeezing your butt. I squeeze my abs sometimes, and I did that for years, and I never knew why I was doing it, but I think subconsciously I just kind of like, I would know, just like crunch my abs, crunch my abs. Maybe that's, people
Yes.
always ask what I do for my abs, and I guess that's it. 'Cause I
Yeah,
never,
I do the same thing, girl.
yeah. So yeah, so I mean, just all these little tricks that we learn, and I think for me, nature has been really helpful too. I think every day I make a point to spend time in nature. It's just very healing and grounding, and it just feels good. It just feels good to be outside and get that sunlight on your skin a little bit. Although
Fresh air.
yeah, the fresh air, just the green,
Hmm.
the whatever, movement is also huge. And actually, when the pandemic started, I had always been a huge gym rat. I was in the gym like every day, lifting weights. I was kind of like one of the stronger girls in the gym. And, people would always comment on my arms, which right now are kind of like spaghetti. But when the pandemic started, I couldn't go to the gym, and I was then, even after it kind of progressed a little bit, I was afraid to go in the gym because um, that's a whole other subject. But long COVID can be really bad for people with the things that we have, and I did have long COVID for a period of time, and it was pretty awful. That's a whole episode in and of itself. But so movement. So getting back to my point. Every day I would just get out and walk, and which seemed so almost silly for me, someone that was into such intense workouts and like going on the stairmaster and lifting weights and like really working out hard. But honestly, it really, I found that to be, it was almost like that was meant to happen, because just getting in that habit of my daily walks, even though now I did very recently, like a week ago, get back in the gym, and I'm going to try to continue that. I still love my walks. I really do. I know. Yay. I know. I'm just like, I have to, it's a little scary because like I said, I had really bad long COVID, and I want to do everything I can to avoid having that again. But it's a balance, and it's a constant balancing act between making these decisions that are going to, keep you safe and protect your health, and also living. And I try
Yeah.
to, I don't always make the right decision, but I'm just trying my best, like any other one of us that has this thing that we're dealing with, to do our
Right.
best, you know.
Just got to listen to your body.
Yeah, and your mind, like what do
Yeah.
you need for your mental health? Because that's another thing is something that I recently learned in the most recent Ehlers-Danlos conference I went to last summer was it doesn't just affect you physically, but there are very real psychiatric things that come with it. Anxiety and depression are not uncommon, which is why I think so many times doctors will just diagnose us as saying, "Oh, you're just anxious." Well, yeah, we
Right.
might be anxious, but there's a lot more going on too. It's not that we're just anxious. It's
Right. And why do you think I'm anxious?
exactly. If your body was malfunctioning every second of every day, you'd be anxious too. You'd have to be crazy to not feel a little like you're losing your mind.
I
So,
think so.
and even like ADHD, I read a stat recently, and I don't want to misquote it, but it was something like um, people with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome are something like 4 or 5 more times likely to have ADHD, which I was diagnosed with in my 30s. I mean, I definitely had it all my life. Very hard time concentrating in school, and just I'm always all over the place, even in my conversations. You'll probably notice this in the podcast. I go here, there, and everywhere, and my mind's always going in a million different directions. I can't do one thing at a
That's what
time.
makes it fun.
It keeps it interesting, right? It keeps it
Yeah.
in. Hey, there's benefits to having it, right? You can focus on all kinds of things at the same
Yes.
time. We're very
Yeah.
charismatic, entertaining people, right?
That's what makes us great.
Exactly. What else? I'm trying to think. Pacing is another thing I think is really, really important. And this is something that I continue to work on. I admit I am not good at it. And the thing is that I think when we have our times where we're feeling well, and it kind of it fluctuates all the time, but when you have those
Mhm.
moments of and days of feeling well, you just want to go and do, and because you don't know when it's going to be taken away from you again. So it's like it's really for me, that's really been a challenge, pacing myself. But I do think it's
Right.
helpful to not overdo it, because if you do, then you wind up hurting yourself and all kinds of
Back to
things.
square one.
Back to square one. I did it recently. I had a hip replacement 3 months ago, and I decided it would be a great idea to walk 4 miles. And then the next couple of days, I couldn't walk at all. So I could barely bear weight on my leg. And my doctor was like, "You need to slow down. That's ridiculous." So I'm like, "Yeah, that's me. That's how I do it always.
I do the same thing. As soon as I feel great, it's time to go.
It's time to go." Exactly.
Take advantage of it.
We're not recommending this, by the way. This is not a
No.
recommendation. This is us admitting that we are human,
This is a
and
confession.
yeah, it's a total confession. We make these errors, and not easy, but you do the best you can to remind yourself to pace. And my son is actually really good. Sean, your cousin, is really good
Yes.
about reminding me. He's like, "Mom," like yesterday, he knew I was a little off. I was a little dizzy, and he's like, "Mom, did you rest today? When are you going to rest?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "Honey, this is me resting, like working on planning my podcast and playing with the animals." And that's my version of resting. Like,
Right.
I don't rest.
Hey, it
I
makes
don't
you
rest
healthy.
well. I don't rest well. I admit it. I admit it. It's just who I am. It's just,
I don't either. Let's be honest here.
it's
I'm
a
about to
family
hop on a
thing.
plane to Europe.
Gosh. Yeah. It's going to be amazing. Amazing.
I'm
Um,
very excited.
very excited for you.
Thank
I think
you.
meditation is another thing that can be really helpful, just to kind of like, especially for people like us, that our minds are so go, go, go all the time. It just
Yeah.
really can kind of help you to slow down if you can, even just
Yeah.
take 2 minutes, you know?
Just some conscious breathing.
Yes, yes, which we did right before
Yeah.
we started
Exactly.
recording. We did a little
Yes.
box breathing where you breathe into the count of four really slowly and deeply, and then you hold it for the count of four, breathe out for the count of four, and then do it again. And it just kind of slows down your nervous system. And that's kind of a thing where our nervous systems are many times in the sympathetic state, which is like the fight or flight state is kind of like
Mhm.
our normal. So we have to do
It's a
extra.
nice reset.
It is a good reset. It just like you can feel like it's palpable. The difference that you feel before you do it and after you do it is truly like very, very noticeable. What do you wish more people understood about EDS?
Yeah, what I wish more people understood about EDS is that even though we may look fine, does not mean that we always are. And it can be scary sometimes for people with EDS, and we need to take the necessary steps in order to feel better, even if we don't want to. Um, and that brings it back to, even though we look all great, and even maybe when we feel great, we want to go out and do things, we can't. And it's one of those things where you kind of have to live it in order to completely understand what it's like. And you can sympathize, but it doesn't mean you empathize, I guess.
Exactly. No, you're right. You're right. It's funny. I mean, I think so many of us feel that same way. It's people see us and they think we're the picture of health, It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I wear shirts like this, because, I try to advocate and I let people know that it's an invisible illness. That's what it means. I mean, if you see somebody who's like missing a leg, it's very obvious. Or if someone's in a
Right.
wheelchair, which sometimes we are, I have been. And, but we have a bunch of stuff inside that's like not working right, or maybe is missing. Like our collagen is missing. That's a big part of
Right.
EDS. We have faulty collagen. So we have, you know, loose ligaments and tendons and all kinds of things that are just not quite held together properly.
Right. I mean, when you look at me, it's Sam, the gym goer, dancer, recent MBA grad. But what's
Yeah,
beneath all of that,
exactly.
And
Exactly. And I
it's just the
think
stuff you don't see.
totally, totally. And even it's funny, I've even gone to like certain medical professionals, and people have such a hard time getting past like what everything looks like on the outside. Even if they know your medical history, they'll be like, "Oh, well, you're healthy." And I'm like, Do you want to maybe look at the stack of medical history that we just went through again? It was funny. I went when I recently had my hip replacement and I went to physical therapy, and the physical therapist had to ask me like a questionnaire of things when we first started. And one of the questions was, how healthy do you consider yourself? Very healthy, a little healthy, your health is fair, your health is poor, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, you're very healthy, right? And I was like, didn't we just go through my entire medical history? And it's just funny. I mean, it just, people believe what they see, and what
Mm.
they see is not what matches what's going on, in the inside. So
Hmm.
it's very, very difficult for people to digest that. And and the other thing I think is really important to note is that one day we can be, Sam and I love to dance, we can be out dancing at a club and having the time of our lives and the lives of the party, and dancing for hours on end, and then the next day we can't even get out of bed.
Oh
So
yeah.
every day is different, it's not, yeah, every day is different. So I think it's so confusing, and I get it. I mean, I understand why it would be confusing for people, but I think it's so confusing for people when they see, oh, like, oh, I thought you were better. And I'm like, well, I was that day, but today's a different day and I don't feel well today. So
Right. Day
I
by
think
day,
it's,
you gotta just feel it out. You never know.
yeah. And I think it's like right now I'm going through a period where I'm feeling, thank God, the best I felt in a really long time. And I'm just riding this wave because, as much as I'd like to believe it's going to last forever, I know from experience, and not to be negative, but just to be a realist, I know from experience there's going to be something else that happens and comes along, and there's going to be a period that feels really, really hard. And and then there's going to be another period of, where things are going to be better. So it's just a matter of, kind of learning to live, here, and not really expect, just kind of riding those highs and lows and trying to stay more neutral throughout it all,
Right.
you know?
Right. And you
Um,
can choose your outlook too, Why
yeah.
choose to feel negative? Why choose to not be happy when you can choose? And I do think that your positivity and your happiness and being thankful for what is working and what you do have when going through, one of the downslopes on the roller coaster really
Hmm.
can help your healing process. Because if you're sitting there being negative all the time, then you're going to feel negative. And,
Hmm.
I do think that your mindset is a big part in how you feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree, but I will say, kind of one of the things that's changed about my opinion over the course of
Hmm.
these years that I've been going through this, and especially in the more recent years, I went through a phase where I was, kind of became this inspiring figure for people where, they'd see all these things I'd go through and then how I'd get back up and, and just deal with it and always have a smile on my face. And I think that I took on that persona, and the truth is it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't always easy, it was tough. And I think that I started to gaslight myself a little bit and do this thing called
Mm,
toxic positivity, where where you say, oh, it could always be worse, and yeah, of course it could always be worse, but you know what, sometimes it just sucks. Sometimes
yeah,
it's just really
that's
hard,
true.
and sometimes when people are in a really dark place, they don't want to hear it could always be worse. That's like the worst thing you can say to somebody. They want to
Hmm.
hear, wow, that's really, really hard. I feel for you, and how can I help? And really just listen to that person. Like if you're, if you're somebody that has somebody with chronic illness in your life, just be there for them, let them vent, let the, listen to what they're feeling, because their feelings are legitimate, and they're
Yeah.
not always going to be happy, positive feelings, because this stuff is really, really hard.
Hmm.
It's not easy to go through. But I,
Right.
on the more positive side, I did actually hear about a study recently where they were saying that patient outcomes were better if people had a more positive outlook about their treatment and their doctors, and like closer relationships with their doctors and things like that. And I actually want to have the people that worked on that study come on the podcast and talk more in detail about that, because I think there is a lot to that, and it is really important, and finding the right medical team, and it is a team. I mean, I think I have, I don't know,
Hmm.
like 10 different specialists on my team. So, I mean, I've pretty
And
much
that feels good
have
to have.
well, yeah, I mean, and you need doctors that you can trust and that you can
Hmm.
be open and honest with, and that are going to take you seriously, and and be proactive and be willing to learn. I think there's still so much to learn about how to treat Ehlers-Danlos and how to just how to cope, how to address all the different
Right,
multitude of factors, and um,
right. And coping is a part of, the process and leading to positivity.
So with the relaunch of the podcast, I'm trying out a new software that, in theory, is supposed to be a lot better for recording podcasts. I'm not sure. The jury's still out because twice now we've kind of lost our sound, so we had to restart. But Sam was just saying something really brilliant, and I want her to elaborate on it again. No pressure, Sam. Um,
Okay.
so Sam, so we were talking about, like getting the right medical team and how important that is to, to coping and to finding answers and stuff. So you want to elaborate on your feelings on that?
Yeah, I just think that coping with what's going on with you is a huge part in driving your motivation to find the right doctors, ask questions, get the right people on your side, and really feel those emotions that you're feeling because they are real. And if you're not able to cope with them, then you can't lead yourself to that full healing process, and you can't lead yourself to that positive outlook like we were talking about. And coping is one of the most important parts because it comes with acceptance. And acceptance, I think, is the biggest part because, pretending like something crazy isn't happening to you when it is,
Yeah.
that's when it becomes unhealthy. it,
Yes,
it
agreed,
can get
100%.
worse.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think that's such a big part of it, and I kind of went through a period of denial where we that's a
It's
good
hard.
segue actually, where I kind of got into this like magical thinking, and oh, I can manifest perfect health, and I can use crystals to heal myself, and all these kind of crazy pseudoscientific methods that I was trying to like rid myself of Ehlers-Danlos. And, while that's a great thought and wow, wouldn't it be nice if we could actually do
Hmm.
that? The reality is it's not truthful or honest. And I was like denying my own reality, gaslighting myself. And I guess I feel like I owe an apology to anybody who I may have hurt in doing so with, my podcasting, with my social media posts. And I sincerely apologize if I made anybody else feel, bad, or like their illness wasn't real, or they, weren't doing enough manifesting or whatever other magical things that they could do to make it disappear. Because I had to kind of go down that rabbit hole to realize that, I think so many times we just feel this like desperation for wellness, and we want
You'll do
so
anything.
badly, yeah, like we want control, we want to, I think that's human nature, right? But especially when
Right.
you're feeling so bad and your body's just like, you feel like your body's just falling apart, and you
Yeah.
want so much to believe that you can put it back together in however way, whatever possible way you can do it. And yeah, and it's just not the truth. So
Right.
um
And, that can be the scariest part, feeling like you're not in control of your body.
yes,
At least that is for me. I feel
100%.
terrified when I don't feel like I have control of my body. Like I'm not choosing right now to do this, and there's nothing I can do right now to stop it. And it's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very scary when, like you stand up and everything goes black, or, you go to pick something up and your back slips out of place, or, I mean, just there's so many, you eat something that you've eaten a million times before, but this one time you eat it, all of a sudden you have like horrible nausea or stomach pain or whatever.
Heartburn, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just very, I kind of feel like we're always on high alert because we never know what's coming next. We never
It's a
know
guessing
what
game.
it really is. It's like, oh, what's going to be the flavor of the day? What's going to be the symptom of
Right.
the day? I mean,
Right.
um, like what are some of your hardest symptoms to deal with, Sam?
Like I said, I think it's really lightheadedness.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it. The joints falling out of place. And also, having the simultaneous diseases, chronic illnesses happening at once. Um, and, sometimes I even go through embarrassment. I mean, through my MBA program, during presentations, because of, mast cell, um, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this may know what that is.
Yes.
For me, if I have anxiety, I feel hot, temperatures really affect it, and I get rashes. And, if I have anxiety and I'm giving a big presentation, I feel the need, even if it's hot outside, to wear a turtleneck because otherwise I got puzzle pieces showing up on my chest.
Yes.
And I feel so embarrassed. And, some of these are the hardest things to deal with because before this and while I'm talking, I might look okay.
Mm-hmm.
But during I don't look okay, and it feels embarrassing to say the
Yeah.
least,
Yeah. You feel
and
out
it's
of
hard.
control. It
I feel out of
is.
control. It brings it back. That's the scariest
Mm-hmm.
part. You're not choosing to do it, and it stinks when you can't control what your body is doing.
Yeah. You just reminded me of kind of a funny little story when your mom was giving birth to, I want to say it was Charlie, which is Sam's youngest
It was.
sibling. Yeah. And my sister was kind enough to let us all be in the room to like welcome my niece, my new little baby niece into the world. And Sam and I were there, and all of a sudden the baby's coming out, and I look at Sam, and like she's got like a rash all over her face is bright red, and she starts like looking like she's gonna go down, and then I started getting it, and then we're both like sitting down, and both of us are on the verge of passing out, and the nurse is coming over and like taking our blood pressure and tending to us, and my poor
While mom's
sister
giving birth.
my poor sister just had a baby, and Samantha and I are like the patients, So I don't
I
know. I
felt
mean, if
so bad.
I know, I'm like, if she, I know she's not having any more babies, but if she ever did, I wouldn't blame her if she didn't welcome us back.
Oh, me too. And when was that? And that, when you think about it, I was 15 years old, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
3.5 years before I even had my diagnosis. This is when
Oh yeah.
symptoms started showing up. It's been a process.
Yes, and I remember you sitting in the waiting room when we were waiting to go back and be there, and you saying your back hurt, and I'm like, she's 15, her back hurts. I'm like, well, that sounds familiar. My back and my neck have been hurting since I was like 8 years old. So, but I didn't know till I was like in my 40s what was
Yeah,
happening. So it's wild. It's a wild, wild ride, I tell you.
I know. You
Oh,
start
so
thinking of all of these other things that have happened, and you're like,
yes,
okay, this makes
yes.
sense now.
Makes so much sense. Every day, honest to God, not every day, but so often when I'm studying about it, or like I read someone else's story, or I talk to a friend, and they say something that happened to them, and I'm like, oh, is that an Ehlers-Danlos thing? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, and it just helps me understand myself a teeny bit better each time.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
like one of the things, I guess I want to talk about comorbidities, which is so many of the other diseases that can go along with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, because um, when your connective tissue isn't working, it affects so many different things. It affects your nervous system, and it affects your mast cells, and they're studying all these different things and why they're so connected. But I know there's a huge prevalence in the community of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome patients that also have mast cell activation disorder, also have dysautonomia and POTS and small fiber peripheral neuropathy. I have all of these things. I know Sam has been diagnosed with several of them as well. So, like, I can't think of one of my friends with it that doesn't have these things. So it's, and it's funny, like even one of the things I learned about, which I could do a whole separate episode on, it's called dyspraxia. And it's like a lack of motor control. And that was something as a child, I always had trouble writing, and I had to have this special thing to hold on to my pencil. I had trouble eating right with forks and spoons, and just the coordination. And then, like Sam is great at this. She's an awesome dancer, and I love to dance, but don't you dare give me steps, because that's like that's like speaking a different language to me. I just get confused and clumsy, and and that's part of the dyspraxia, which is also very often goes along with EDS. And it makes me clumsy too. Like yesterday, perfect example. Yesterday, I started my day by banging my head really hard on the couch. I covered it up with makeup, but I have a little bump and a bruise right here.
No.
I ended the day by breaking glass and like shattering it all over my kitchen. And this is like a day in the life. This is a normal day for Bonni. It's just like so ridiculous. So,
Feel very well.
are you very clumsy? Yeah. See, it's a
I'll,
proprioception.
yeah, I'm looking into the wall and walk into breathe.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's part of it too. Is poor proprioception. We don't know where our bodies are in space. So we walk into things, we bump our heads into things, we misjudge things. It's so I guess, but we'll kind of wrap it up by talking about advice if they're going through a really dark, hard time right now with their um I think for me, like I've been in some horribly, horribly dark places. And when you're in it, when you're in the thick of it, like particularly for me, I think after I go through a major surgery, and I've had many major surgeries, but after going through, I think I just feel so useless, and I feel like a
Mhm.
burden, and I
Yeah,
feel, and
it's
um
hard.
and just so disabled. I mean, I like not being
Hmm.
able to do things that I'm normally able to do. Like when I'll go back to the most recent thing, which was the hip replacement, and
Hmm.
having to rely upon other people to give me rides, and, pick something up off the floor for me, and relying upon a walker to move from point A to point B. Um, and it really like messes with your psyche when you're in those places. And
Yeah.
David, my fiance, has been through um, many of these situations with me. And I started crying, and I was like so upset, and I just, I felt like I was never going to get out of this dark place. And he's like, this is temporary. And in the moment, like, I guess it was good advice, but like it doesn't feel temporary when you're in it.
Yeah, it
But
sucks.
it's
Yeah.
horrible. It's like you just feel like you're
Yeah.
in this endless pit of despair and misery, and like you're just going to keep spiraling downward, and it's life is never going to be normal again. But here's what I'll tell you is 3 months ago, that's where I was. And right now, like I feel so much better. I'm back in the gym. I'm walking. I'm lifting weights. I just traveled to New York for a week with my son, and
Hmm.
and like I'm doing, like I'm back on my podcast. I mean, it's I'm
Right.
in a
And did you imagine that? Did you
no,
imagine?
no. Like
Right.
it's
There you
hard
go.
to see it when you're in it. And I guess that's
Right.
my words of wisdom is just
Hmm.
know that as dark as this moment may feel, if you just keep moving through it, eventually you're going to get to something that's better. And it may not be perfect, but if you can have something to hold on to, and knowing that you're going to get through this, whatever particular thing you're going through that's really hard, and there will be brighter days ahead. I think that's something that everybody needs to hold on to moving forward, you know.
Beautiful.
Thank
Well
you.
said.
Thank you, darling.
Of
So
course.
Sam, is there anything that I didn't talk about that you want to like discuss in this conversation that you feel is important for the community to hear?
I don't know. I guess if you're reaching out or if you're listening to this podcast and you don't feel like you have that community, reach out, and
Yes.
we will be that community. We are
Yeah.
happy to.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
It gives us, again, it gives us purpose. It gives us meaning. It gives like a reason for all this pain and stuff that, if we can help other people to deal with it and use our experience to help other people, it's so important. And another thing I'll add is there are so many great online communities. I mean, many times we don't have the wellness to be out and about and, going here and there. And, it's transportation is an issue, or, just
Mhm.
being well enough to sit upright and go meet somebody is difficult. But there are so many amazing online resources. There are podcasts, there are, Facebook groups. If you're not on Facebook, it's worth it just to get on there for some of the groups, because it's, really what I look at it as, you're getting the medical advice of all the doctors of all the people in that group, and the experiences of all the people in all that group. And if you're having a particular issue, you can get all these, advice from people that have been in that same situation themselves. And it's just,
Mhm.
that's from the medical standpoint, but from the psychological standpoint, I feel like it has rescued me so many times. And so many of my close friends that are zebras, I know they've said the same thing. Like, they don't know how they would have made it through without having the support that we do from each other, because it's just there's no way to put a price on that. It's
There
beautiful
really
how we can
isn't.
help one another. No.
Yeah, there really
So,
isn't a place for that.
yep. So, Sam, thank you for being my
Thank
first
you.
guest on the relaunch of the podcast. I do have like 50,
Mhm.
50 or so episodes in the bag, 52, I think. But this is kind of like a fresh start, and a new evolved me with like a fresh new perspective, and losing that toxic positivity and magical thinking and keeping it more real. And yeah, and just I want to get more into the science and bring some doctors on, and people that are into the scientific realities of things, and really do everything we can to help, not just the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome community, but the chronic illness community as a whole, because I think there are so many overlapping issues that we all deal with. And I think we can, if we just help each other out, we can all live a much better, happier, healthier life. So with that, I want to send everyone my love, kisses, and kisses to you, Sam. I can't wait to see you again. And sayonara for now.
Yep.
Ciao.